It was a Wednesday afternoon in Los Angeles, 1980. Roger Davies sat alone in a half-empty rehearsal room, arms crossed, watching a woman he had already decided to walk away from. The fluorescent lights above him flickered once. Outside, the city moved in its usual indifferent rhythm. The traffic on Sunset, the distant sound of someone loading equipment into a van 3 floors below. Inside that room, something was happening that Roger Davies could not yet name. He had been in the music business for nearly a decade. He had sat in rooms like this one more times than he could count. He had heard thousands of voices, in studios, in rehearsal spaces, in bars with sticky floors and broken microphones. He had walked away from most of them without a second thought. But this woman standing at the front of that room, was different in a way that unsettled him, and that unsettled feeling was exactly why he had already made up his mind to say no. Roger Davies was not yet the legendary manager the music industry would later call one of the most instinctive ears in rock history. He was a young Australian who had built a modest but solid reputation managing smaller acts on the edges of the Los Angeles scene. He was known for being careful, methodical. He did not take risks on lost causes, not because he lacked courage, but because he had seen what happened to managers who let sentiment override judgment. He had watched colleagues pour years of their lives into artists the industry had moved past. He had watched those colleagues lose everything. Roger Davies did not intend to be one of them. And in 1980, Tina Turner was, by every visible measure, a lost cause. She was 40 years old in an industry that had already decided 40 was not the beginning of something. Her marriage to Ike Turner had ended in violence so public, so thoroughly documented, that the music industry had done what it always does with complicated stories. It had simplified her into a symbol and moved on. The record deals were gone. The major concert bookings were gone. The money had thinned to almost nothing. Tina Turner was performing in small clubs and hotel lounges across Las Vegas, singing to half-full rooms, working for fees that would have embarrassed artists half her age with a fraction of her talent. The music industry had a quiet but firm consensus about Tina Turner. She was the past. A tragedy, some said. A cautionary tale, said others. But not the future. Never the future. Roger Davies had heard the consensus. He believed it. And yet, someone had called in a favor. Someone had said, just watch her perform. Just once. Just one afternoon. Roger Davies was a man who honored his obligations. So he went. The rehearsal room was on the second floor of a building on the east side of Hollywood that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and old ambition. Folding chairs had been arranged in loose rows. There were perhaps 15 people scattered among them. A small band was setting up in the corner. Roger Davies took a seat near the back. He kept his arms crossed. His expression remained professionally neutral. He checked his watch. He had another meeting at 4 o'clock. He would give this 30 minutes. That was generous, he told himself. Tina Turner walked in without any announcement. She was wearing simple clothes, a plain top, dark trousers, nothing that signaled a performance was about to happen. She spoke briefly to the band. She did not address the small audience. She simply began. Roger Davies uncrossed his arms 11 minutes into the set. He did not notice himself doing it until afterward. What was happening in that room was not simply a performance. This was a woman who had survived something that should have destroyed her, and had somehow converted that survival into fuel. Every note she produced carried weight. Not the performed weight of someone acting out an emotion, real weight. And the room felt it. The people who had come out of professional obligation stopped shifting in their seats. A woman near the front pressed her hand to her mouth. A man 2 rows back leaned forward, elbows on knees, completely still. Roger Davies watched the audience watching Tina Turner. And something shifted in him, slowly, almost reluctantly, like a lock he had carefully set against exactly this kind of feeling, turning open against his will. But he was a careful man, and careful men do not make decisions in rehearsal rooms. He left when it was over. He said the polite and appropriate things. He shook the right hands. He made no promises. In his car, in traffic on Sunset Boulevard, Roger Davies conducted the argument he had already had with himself. She was 40 years old. The market had moved past her demographic. The industry had already rendered its verdict. The risk was enormous. He had other clients who depended on him. He had obligations. By the time he reached his 4 o'clock meeting, he had made his decision. The answer was no. He was certain. He was wrong. The next morning, Roger Davies woke before sunrise and found he could not return to sleep. He told himself it was the coffee he had consumed too late the night before. He made breakfast. He read the newspaper from front to back. He did not think about Tina Turner. He thought about Tina Turner. By Thursday afternoon, he had made 2 phone calls, framed casually as routine industry conversation, asking colleagues about the state of the adult contemporary market in Europe. He asked about stadium demographics. He asked whether anyone had seriously examined what might happen if an artist of genuine power was paired with the right producer and the right material. Both colleagues gave him the same answer. Too late, too risky. The window had closed. Roger Davies thanked them and hung up. That night he sat in his living room and thought about the woman near the front of the rehearsal room, the one who had pressed her hand to her mouth. He thought about what it meant that a woman with that kind of power was playing hotel lounges for fees that barely covered her expenses. There was something wrong about that. Not simply professionally wrong. Wrong in a way that sat below the level of professional calculation. On Friday morning, Roger Davies picked up the phone. He put it back down. He stood at the window for several minutes. Then he picked it up again. He dialed. When the call connected, he said he had been thinking about what he had witnessed on Wednesday afternoon. He said he wanted to speak further. He said, and this was the part he had not planned to say, that he believed something important was being missed. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then Tina Turner's voice, quiet, controlled, carrying within it the particular wariness of a woman who has been promised things by men for most of her adult life. She said, "What exactly do you think is being missed?" Roger Davies took a breath, and then he said the words that would change the trajectory of popular music. He said, "You." He said that what was being missed was her, not the version of her the industry had already decided was finished, not the woman attached to a narrative the world believed it had already closed. The version that had been standing in that rehearsal room on Wednesday afternoon. The version that had made a stranger press her hand to her mouth. The version that had taken a careful man and removed 2 nights of sleep from him against his will. That version, he said, was not finished. That version had not yet begun. What happened after that phone call has been documented in the kind of detail that attaches itself to stories the world eventually understands it almost lost. The Private Dancer album, the world tours, the Grammy Awards, 4 of them in a single night in 1985, for an artist the industry had written off 5 years earlier. The stadium shows selling out arenas with capacities of 18 and 20,000 people in cities that had held quiet funerals for her career. Tina Turner did not simply come back. She arrived at 44 years old as something the music industry had never quite seen before. An artist whose second chapter was not a redemption arc, it was a detonation. Private Dancer sold more than 20 million copies worldwide. Her 1985 world tour became one of the highest-grossing concert runs of the decade. Roger Davies managed Tina Turner for more than 2 decades. In interviews across those years, he consistently described the decision in the language of professional assessment. He said he had identified an undervalued talent. He said the market data supported the investment. The people who knew Roger Davies best always smiled when they heard that answer, because they knew that data did not explain the 2 nights without sleep. Data did not explain the careful man calling a number he had promised himself he would not call. Data did not explain what it felt like to sit in a folding chair in a half-empty room and watch a woman convert 4 decades of survival into something that made strangers forget themselves. Some decisions come from somewhere below the level of professional logic. Some decisions come from the part of a person that recognizes, before the mind has caught up, that what is standing in front of them must not be allowed to disappear. Roger Davies was a careful man. On a Wednesday afternoon in Los Angeles in 1980, he sat in a folding chair in a room that smelled of carpet cleaner, and something in him recognized what was standing at the front of that room. He said no. And then, 3 days later, he said the only thing that, looking back, he could have ever honestly said. The rest is history. But history, real history, is rarely made by the obvious decisions. It is made by the careful men who lose 2 nights of sleep, by the phone calls made on Friday mornings against every reasonable instinct, by the single word spoken into a silence, the word that, against all odds, turned out to be the only true thing. You. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel. Every week we uncover the human stories that history almost forgot. Leave a comment below. Was there ever a moment when someone refused to walk away from you? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. We will see you in the next story.